Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the struggle bus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Welcome to part 2 of the Strugglebus Basics Basic Rules. I meant to change that name, I forgot. We're going with it. It's canon now. The Strugglebus Basics Basic Rules. So if you remember from our previous video, we went over rules number 1 and 2, which were rules number 1 to play the corners before sides before center, and rule number 2 to make sure to keep balance between third and fourth line stones early in the game. And so if you didn't watch the first video, you might as well go watch that now. And if you have, you guys should buckle in for this one. I guess the bus doesn't actually have any seatbelts, so just like hold on, I guess, because these rules step up a little bit. They're still basic, but they are not as simple and straightforward as the first two. So with that, we are going to jump right into rule number 3. And rule number 3 is, unless you need it for life and death, avoid first and second line stones early in the game. So this kind of builds off of the balancing the third and fourth line stones. Typically in the beginning, if you're looking to get influence, you're going to be playing your fourth line stones. If you're looking to get territory, you're going to be playing your third line stones. First and second line stones tends to be more focused towards endgame, where you're really solidifying your territories. But that isn't something we typically do at the beginning of the game. But it's something that newer players will often do a lot. And so I've actually got some examples that come from games, because these are just best to show in the context within a game. And so we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to explain why this rule is. So we have this game here where this rule gets broken pretty quickly. So this game is a good example and really showcases pretty quickly why this rule is important. So if you remember from our first video, we said that we were going to be playing our corners before our sides, and you'll notice that both players follow that rule. Black then chooses to enclose one of his corners. White does a side extension. Black encloses his other corner, and white makes a base at the top, also approaching the corner. Black then approaches one of the other corners, and white defends with a shape called the iron pillar. Black backs off to make his base, and this is where white breaks rule number 3, and he plays an early second line move that isn't needed for life or death. So playing this doesn't threaten the life of these two stones. It also doesn't make this group any stronger than it already was. It does, but that group wasn't under any danger. And so Black recognizes that this was too early, and he tanukis and plays elsewhere and takes a really big move. In this case, he's playing where he thinks white should have played, and I agree that this is likely where white should have played. White then follows up his first mistake with the second mistake, still playing a second line move when his group is already alive and Black's group is still not going to die here. Black ignores this again and jumps out. And so in essence, white traded these two moves for these two moves. And so the main reason why I say these moves are too early is, let's look at what white actually got here in terms of points by playing these two marked stones. So I'm going to be generous here and say that all of these turn into points. Oops. But that's real generous. That's 8 points, and he played 2 additional moves to get there. He already had 2 stones. So we're looking at 4 stones to get 8 points, which is very inefficient at the beginning of the game. Typically, we're looking for big moves. We're looking for like 10-point moves early in the game. And so these 2 moves really didn't add too much in terms of what white is solidifying here. And since these 2 stones were in no danger before, all these 2 moves did is secured this territory. And it's just too early in the game to be doing that. And looking at the board, the whole picture of the board, the triangle stones are going to do a lot more. And I know some of you right now are going, hey, but he played in the center too early with F15. And we'll get to that. The second example to show this comes from another game by one of the same players of the last game, the one who correctly ignored the early moves. In this game, he's white, and it happens later in this game, but we'll go through and show what the beginning looks like. Again, all four corners are going to be taken first, and then black chooses to approach a corner. White's going to defend. We're going to go get the sides, and then another corner is going to get approached. These are all pretty normal things that we would expect, going for the corners, then the sides, ignoring the center at first. And then after we finish that, black takes his extension, white blocks, extension, white takes his extension, and now here is where we get the move. So black plays S11, which is a second line move, pretty early in the game. It does not threaten to kill any white groups. It did not make any of black's groups alive, and white again correctly recognizes this move is too early. I don't need to answer this. And he tanukis and plays away and plays a much bigger move. And it's interesting here. You'd think that black playing S11, he's playing this going, this demands a response. This is a big move. And white goes, no, I'm going to play over here instead. And it's interesting, which move does black answer? Does he follow up his threat, or does he recognize that white's move is a bigger move? He recognizes that white's move is a bigger move, and while he doesn't directly answer it, he's playing to get his group stronger. And he's still not answering, or following up rather, his S11 move, and he's still not following it up. It isn't until many moves later that black actually follows up S11, because it was never a big move to begin with. And the reason that we consider this small is the same reason as the other example. It just doesn't secure that many points. Black secures maybe an additional 4 points with this move. And yes, threatens to take some away from white, but it's still just too small for a move like this when black already had a group that was fully alive and white already still has a group that is fully alive. The third and final example that we have is another game. This one's by two different players than our previous games, and also shows up a little bit later in the game. Again, we'll notice all four corners are taken, and then corners are approached and defended. As we would typically expect, you notice there's a pretty good balance of third and fourth line stones on this board, so both players are following rules 1 and 2 pretty good. And so nothing too crazy at first. Black decides to invade, which is fine. He eventually goes and gets a group, and then we get the mistake. White plays an early second line move. This corner group was not in trouble. This black group still isn't at risk of dying. And so this is too early, and black recognizes that's too early. I'm not going to answer that. I do not need to block that. And he plays a big move and extends from the last corner on the board. And so same thing here. White doesn't even follow up on this side. He instead plays here. So white kind of admits that move was too early when black called him out on it. And so these three examples kind of help show why we avoid early second and first line moves. For an example of a first line move that's too early, we can back this game up a little bit to where white plays here. Say black also made the mistake of playing a second line move too early by answering this move. If white were then to play here, he would then be playing a first line move that's just too early. And this is a great example of it, because if we back this up and look at the points that black is threatening to secure here, at most for this little group, he's going to get 8 points. And again, this is being very generous. So black only has 8 points to protect here. So what's white really going after by playing this move? He's really going after those 8 points. But again, if black ignores this, white needs to follow up to actually get those points gone, right? So he follows up here. It now took him 2 moves to get those 8 points, and black is still perfectly healthy here, and he got a big move at R14. So now black can find some timing to play another big move on the board, while white is wasting all his moves playing these small first line moves. And that brings us to rule number 4. Rule number 4 is probably the toughest rule of the Strugglebus Basics Basic Rules. And that is, don't attach to weak stones. And so I'm going to apologize in advance. This one's a little tricky to understand until you're going to get a little stronger. But if you follow this rule, things are going to work out well for you. And so the best way to explain this is with an example from a game. And you guys may recognize the game that this comes from. So here we have this game again. And I have to come clean here. I totally lied. I modified this game a little bit to showcase some rules. In the actual game, White did not play this bad move. Bad bus driver, I'm sorry. In the actual game, he went and invaded the other corner. And so we do a pretty typical variation here. Black gets his wall, and then White does an extension to break up this right side. And this is where Black makes the mistake. Black plays here and attaches to a weak stone. So let's back it up a little bit. What are we calling a weak stone? So taking a look at the marked stone. Right now, it's one stone. It's by itself. It's nowhere near any other friendly white stones. To the top, we have this monstrous wall, and to the bottom, we have a strong black group. And so the stone is by itself, and with it being in the middle of this, it's going to be difficult for this stone to get life. It's not going to die, but it's not going to have a very easy time just making a base and living. And so because of that, this is a weak stone. We should not be attaching to it. And the reason we do not want to attach to it is when you attach to a stone, it demands a response. White cannot ignore this. So White is going to extend. And now White's stone is now two stones, and it's significantly stronger than it was before. And Black is going to feel compelled to also extend to match this. And then White could extend again, and then Black follows. So now let's look at the board, and let's compare groups, the A group to the B group. Looking at these groups, they both actually seem reasonably strong right now, especially considering it's White's turn. So Black got a strong group out of this, and White got a strong group out of this. The problem is this started with White having a weak stone. So who made out more on this? White made out more on this because they both have strong groups here, but White started with a weak group. Basically, Black forced White to fix his weakness, and White is more than happy to do that. And so, again, this rule is a little tricky, but if you follow the advice of not attaching to a weak stone, it'll help you out a lot. Typically, why players do it is they think they're attacking the stone. And if that's your plan, if you want to attack this stone, typically you want to do it from a little farther away. In this case, we're going to want to do it from this side so that we can push White towards that wall there. What's nice about this, since you didn't attach to it, when White answers, Black isn't forced to respond here. Right? This stone is no weaker than it was before because locally White didn't get stronger against that stone. So now Black doesn't need to respond there. He can do another move like this that White's likely going to respond, and then can play something like this. And so now we're looking at a group that now you can really see the weakness of this group, right? He can't make a base here because S16 can undercut him at any point in time. So now White's got to run out potentially. And this isn't going to end well for White. We'll get into why that's the case in another video where we go over attacking and fighting, but that's for another time. But you can see here, you can probably just get the sense that this group isn't going to do too well on this board. So that's really the difference between attaching to a weak stone versus applying pressure correctly. If we attach to it, this is the result we get and it's White's turn. If you compare that to this is the result we get and it's Black's turn. It's night and day. So hopefully this did a good job of explaining a pretty difficult concept. And that brings us to Rule 5. So rule 5 is don't save every stone. This rule's probably the easiest of all of them to understand, while also being the most difficult one to actually do in your own games. Because we want to save all our stones. They're like our children or our pets. You're not just gonna give them up. But sometimes it's the thing to do. And so I'm going to use another in-game example to show this. So I'm not going to go through the beginning of the game to see how we got here because this is pretty far in the game. But white has just extended to try to get more points here, and then black goes to try to cut off these 3 white stones. White plays a pretty slick pinch here, and then black connects, and then white connects, and then black goes here, which threatens to kill the white stones. Okay, look guys, we're gonna pretend that that group right there is totally live and that we're actually just talking about saving these 3 stones. Just ignore the fact that that group right there is definitely not alive right now, and that is what white should be saving. If white plays away, say he plays here, black can do this, and if you capture, then you lose the stones. So what does white do here? White in game saved his stones. But should he save those stones? What does he get out of this? It's Gote. All he does is save those 3 stones. If you look at this board, are there moves that are bigger than saving those 3 stones? Gee, I don't know. Are there? Okay, I'm done. And the answer is yes. There are a lot of moves that are bigger than saving those 3 stones. Also, it's worth pointing out, if you play one of those big moves and then black goes and captures, you get a second move. So let's look at a pretty simple one here where we can play this, which cuts off this stone, and you're going to say, hey, that looks pretty early for a second line move. And it is. It's a little early, but this one just happens to be really big because it has a really nice follow-up. So we play this move. If black then goes to capture your stones, you get to play your follow-up now. This real big move. So now, all you had to do was give up these 3 stones to get both A and B. And in this situation, white gets a huge advantage from sacrificing those 3 stones. But this is hard to do in your games, and it's difficult. And it was difficult for white as well. He did choose to save them. So this is, again, one of probably the easiest rule to understand, but just the toughest to implement because it's not always easy to sacrifice stones. But it is something that's important, and sometimes you just have to do it. And rule number 6 is a simple one, and that is all rules are meant to be broken. Sometimes, we understand the rules, but sometimes you just have to break them for various reasons, and that is okay. And so we've got 2 examples from the games that we already showed in the previous examples, and so we'll go to one of them now. You guys may remember this game when I said that white played on a second line too early and black tanuki'd, and then white followed up, but also too small of a move, and then black jumped out. And this kind of breaks the rule of corners, then sides, then center. Looking at this board, you're like, wait a second, this corner is wide open. Why aren't we going after that? And in this case, when black played this stone, he had a really good follow-up. So here, while this is a very central-based move, if white doesn't respond to this, his whole corner is going to die. And this move just sets up a really devastating potential framework for black, since white has nothing in the center now, and black has all of these nice groups facing it. So yes, this breaks rule number 1, but sometimes rules are meant to be broken. So this was the board state, and we were talking about whether or not white should save his 3 stones. And I suggested that white could make a move like this. And this is a second line move that's somewhat early in the game. This is, this is move 94, so it's a little bit later, but you may have been like, hey, that's too early for a second line move. But again, all rules are meant to be broken. And so that ends our Strugglebus Basics Basic Rules series. We're going to have plenty of more content to go over various other important topics. But this is my fundamental framework that I use when I'm teaching new players and when I'm reviewing games for new players. And I would say all the way up to probably 10K, even 8K on OGS, you'll see a lot of these rules get broken. And sometimes it is as simple as just taking the time and not playing these slow moves, and all of a sudden you just start getting free moves and really getting ahead of your opponents if they are playing these slow moves instead. So hopefully this will help you think about these concepts a little bit more, and can help you with your game. So thank you for joining our ride on the Struggle Bus. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you will continue to join us on this lovely ride down this road of learning Go. I'm not sure what our next video is going to be, but whatever I choose, hopefully it'll be entertaining and helpful for newer players. So until then, thank you for riding on the Struggle Bus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Have a good one, guys.